The night had already absorbed the sounds of routine war when the two Russian Su-27 fighters began their return flight. From the cockpit, the mission looked finished. Fuel levels were stable. The sky was clear enough. There was no sign of pursuit, no radar warning screaming danger, no visible retaliation following them home. Below, the landscape of eastern Ukraine lay dark and broken, a terrain that had learned to hide its pain beneath shadows. Hours earlier, civilians had been moving through those same streets, unaware that supersonic aircraft were cutting through the air above them with lethal intent. The strike had been fast and devastating. Missiles released from altitude tore into residential zones, hitting buildings that held no military value. Apartments collapsed in seconds, streets filled with smoke, debris, and screams. The pilots did not see faces. They saw coordinates, infrared signatures, heat blooms on targeting screens. In the logic of modern aerial warfare, distance dissolves responsibility. By the time emergency responders reached the impact sites, the aircraft were already hundreds of kilometers away, racing back toward Russian airspace. Inside Russian command channels, the mission was marked as completed. No immediate losses, no intercepts. Another successful sortie logged into the system. The Su-27s crossed the border and descended toward their home airbase, a facility that had supported combat aviation since Soviet times. Hardened shelters, long concrete runways, layered air defenses. On paper it was safe, well defended, untouchable. The jets touched down smoothly. Tires screamed against the runway. Parachutes deployed and fell away. Ground crews moved into position, guiding the aircraft toward their shelters. Engines powered down, ladders rolled in. The pilots climbed out, helmets tucked under their arms, their faces calm, unreadable. For them, the war had paused, another mission completed, another return without consequence. What they did not know was that the moment those Su-27s landed, they had already been marked for destruction. Ukraine had been watching, not reacting emotionally, not impulsively, watching patiently, methodically, waiting for a mistake that modern militaries always make eventually: routine, predictability, confidence. Ukraine's intelligence network had learned to think like its enemy. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, drone surveillance, and human sources had all converged on one critical insight: the aircraft responsible for civilian deaths would return to the same base. They would land, they would refuel, they would sit still. In modern warfare, movement is survival, stillness is death. The airbase had long been assumed safe because of its distance from the front lines. Russian commanders believed Ukrainian strike capabilities could not reach that far with precision. Even if missiles could reach, air defenses would neutralize them. That belief was the shield protecting the base more than concrete or steel ever could. Ukraine shattered that belief in a single, coordinated strike. The planning had begun almost immediately after confirmation of civilian casualties. Not as revenge, but as strategy. Ukrainian doctrine had evolved under fire. Instead of attempting to contest Russia in the air directly, Ukraine focused on denying Russia the ability to operate safely from its own infrastructure. Aircraft were most vulnerable on the ground. Pilots were replaceable. Planes were not. Bases were predictable, and predictable targets could be erased. The operation was layered. Drones were launched first, not to destroy, but to confuse, low, flying slow, deliberately visible to Russian radar. Air defense systems activated, lighting up the sky with search radars and targeting beams. Operators locked onto the drones and fired. Missiles left their launchers. Ammunition stocks were consumed. The defenders believed the threat had been neutralized. That was the moment Ukraine had been waiting for. Behind the distraction came the real strike. Precision weapons, programmed with exact coordinates of aircraft shelters, fuel depots, ammunition storage, and command buildings. Flying low, exploiting terrain, threading gaps in radar coverage that had been mapped weeks in advance, there was no dramatic warning, no sirens in time, no scramble orders issued fast enough. The first explosion tore through a hardened aircraft shelter. Concrete designed to withstand near misses collapsed inward as internal fires erupted. A Su-27 inside was instantly engulfed, fuel tanks detonating. sending flames shooting out of the shelter doors. Shockwaves rippled across the airfield. Ground crews ran, some frozen in disbelief, others already injured by flying debris. A second strike hit the fuel storage area. Massive fireballs rose into the night sky, turning darkness into daylight. Burning aviation fuel spilled across the tarmac, flowing like liquid fire, cutting off escape routes and igniting secondary explosions. The sound was not one blast, but dozens, overlapping, relentless, consuming. Then came the command center. Communications went silent. Screens went dark. Officers who seconds earlier had been tracking radar returns were thrown to the floor. Coordination collapsed instantly. Without centralized command, air defenses became isolated nodes, blind and confused, firing blindly or not at all. The Su-27s that had landed just hours earlier never flew again. One was destroyed outright in its shelter. The other, damaged beyond repair, burned for hours as firefighters struggled to approach through intense heat and exploding munitions. By dawn, the proud silhouettes of Russia's air superiority fighters were reduced to twisted metal and ash. But Ukraine was not finished. The runway itself was cratered next. Precision strikes punched deep holes into the concrete, rendering it unusable for fast jets. Even aircraft that survived the initial assault were now trapped. A base without a runway is a prison for planes. Repairs would take days, possibly weeks, under constant threat of follow-up strikes. The psychological impact spread faster than the flames. Russian pilots across the region began to question the safety of their own bases. Commanders were forced to relocate aircraft further from the front, increasing flight times, reducing sortie rates, and stretching logistics thinner. Every additional kilometer meant less time over targets and more vulnerability during transit. Inside Ukraine, the effect was immediate and profound. This was not just retaliation. It was proof that Russian aircraft could kill civilians and still be hunted down. Proof that distance no longer guaranteed safety. Proof that Ukraine's reach extended far deeper than many had believed. Families who had lost loved ones in the earlier strike would never see justice in a courtroom, but they saw something else: consequence. The message was clear, even if never officially stated. There would be no safe return. Every mission carried a cost. Every landing could be the last. International observers analyzed satellite images within hours. Burned scars, destroyed shelters, cratered runways. The destruction was undeniable. Analysts who once dismissed Ukrainian long-range strike capabilities revised their assessments overnight. This was not improvisation. This was planning, intelligence, and execution at a level that forced respect, even from adversaries. For Russia, the loss went beyond hardware. Air power relies on confidence. Pilots must believe they will come home. Maintenance crews must believe their base will be there tomorrow. Commanders must believe their defenses work. That night, all three beliefs were shaken. The Su-27 is more than a jet. It is a symbol of Russian air doctrine, designed during the Cold War to dominate the skies.